Hello, I'm Mario Anderson, and welcome to In Focus Kentucky, where we take a look at issues that matter to you right here in the Bluegrass State, and we'll talk to the lawmakers, community organizers, and people like you who help shape those policies. Today, we're focusing on the bourbon industry's impact on the state of Kentucky and also Bourbon Without Borders, a new law passed that allows visitors to ship bottles home from Kentucky. For almost as long as Kentucky distillers have opened their doors to visitors, they've been asked one constant question. If I buy a bottle here, can you ship it home for me so I don't have to pack it in my suitcase? Well, the answer has always been no, but that changed back in April when House Bill 400 was signed into law, allowing distillery and winery visitors to have their purchases shipped home. Later in the show, we'll speak with the bill's primary sponsor in Kentucky's House. But first, June 14th marked National Bourbon Day, and we traveled to Bardstown for the National Bourbon Ribbon Cutting Ceremony. A full crowd of bourbon supporters made sure to be on hand as the city of Bardstown and even the governor's office declared June 14th as National Bourbon Day in the state of Kentucky. The proclamation went hand in hand with a nationwide celebration honoring bourbon as Kentucky's premier spirit.
Bardstown's a great tourism destination, but we are the bourbon capital of the world, despite what some other folks may think in other parts of the state. And we are very proud of that claim. And any day to celebrate with bourbon, you don't need many reasons.
We're really excited to be here, to see that, to see people enjoying that. That's a big part of what makes Bardstown special.
The city of Bardstown recognized the historical significance of bourbon in their town with a celebration that included local leaders reading special proclamations, and guests of the event all took part in a special toast to National Bourbon Day and to Nelson County's bourbon industry.
Well, the bourbon industry is vital to Bardstown and Nelson County. It's one of our largest employers. The economic impact of nearly $100 million annually through tourism alone. So we see hundreds of thousands, literally, visitors coming in, not just for our distilleries, which are a big part of it, but everything around the distilleries, the downtown shopping and everything that supports it.
Essentially, it's celebrating what our community means. It's a part of what defines us as Bardstown, the history, the bourbon industry. It's part of what we do, and we're really excited to be here and to experience that.
Join me now to talk about new legislation that was signed into law back in April that will soon affect distilleries and wineries in Kentucky is State Representative Chad McCoy of the 50th District, which represents Nelson County. Thanks so much for joining us here on In Focus Kentucky.
Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure to do it.
Absolutely. And let's talk about House Bill 400, a bill that you sponsored that is now into Kentucky law. How did this idea come about, and why did you want to be a part of it?
This idea has been brewing for a long time. In my district, Nelson County, we have over 6 current distilleries that are active that have tourists coming in. We're getting, Mario, we're getting almost 800, 900,000 visitors a year, and they survey them constantly. And the #1 complaint is, I'm here, I just purchased these souvenir bottles, can I ship them home? Because you know what it's like trying to get on an airplane, carrying all your luggage, let alone a couple bottles of liquor through the TSA. So kind of capitalizing on that, we started working with all of the organizations that are involved. And you got to remember, in Kentucky, we still have that 3-tier system. So we have retail stores, we have distributors, and we have manufacturers. And because of some of the history of this law, you're never allowed to be in more than one category. And what you find then is, if we allow shipping to occur from a distillery, well, that's a manufacturer now doing both the distribution and the retail side. So we needed to work through some issues there, along with the UPS, FedEx folks, because they have lots of rules and regulations, not only at the national level, but internally about what they can and can't ship. So kind of a lot of moving parts that we had to deal with on this bill.
Now, does House Bill 400 allow for shipment to all 50 states in the country?
It will, but the way it's designed right now is you have to be a reciprocal state. So what we've done is removed the barrier for Kentucky. So Kentucky will allow you to ship out. Now the question is, will the state that you're in allow you to ship in? I think there are 5 or 6 places, including DC, that allow it. But we've been contacted by almost every state in the union, and they've asked for What did we do? Can we get a copy of the bill? Can you come talk to us? I think what you're going to see now is a lot of other states will start to, over the next year or two, adopt similar laws, which will allow us to pretty much expand all over the United States.
And so for someone that may be visiting in the state of Kentucky, on a tourist, is there a, how much can a tourist ship home under this new law?
So the way the new law is set up, and this part's not new. When you were here visiting, you were allowed to purchase 4.5 liters per person per day of the souvenir bottles. That roughly ends up being 6 bottles, 750 milliliter bottles. You will now be allowed to ship those home. In addition, what we've done with this law is we've authorized a Bourbon of the Month club, if you will. So once you're at the distillery, you can sign up and now be on a distribution list for future shipments as new product rolls out, specialty items, that kind of stuff.
And talk about the work with just working with your fellow legislators on both sides of the aisle to kind of present this idea as a bill, and then just trying to convince them that this was needed for the state of Kentucky.
Sure. When you look at the state of Kentucky, what are we known for? Walk outside of our border, what are we known for? Horses and bourbon, right? And the tourism that's coming from this is just massive. So I think legislatures over the last 5 or 6 years have really caught on to the economic impact, the very positive economic impact that the tourist industry, that the bourbon industry brings in. And so convincing them wasn't that tough. But as you and I both know, especially in the eastern part of our state, we have some folks that have religious reasons that they object to the bourbon industry. And getting those folks on board has been easier because we're explaining to them. Number one, we're not expanding where you can buy alcohol or who can get it. We're protecting the 3-tier system. We're making sure that all the regulations are there. So we don't want shipments into dry territories. We don't want minors to be able to get alcohol. And the industry is really careful about that kind of stuff. So when you show them that we're protecting it, and then show the real economic impact this has, the job creation and the growth, folks get on board pretty quick.
And you touched on that economic impact. Share with us about those bourbon distilleries and wine distilleries and how this new law could affect their industries and the workers that are there.
Well, and you brought up a good point because we haven't talked about this. House Bill 400 also allows shipment of wine. And that's going to have a more immediate impact because a lot of states allow for the shipment of wine. In fact, we were one of the few that didn't. So now what you're going to see is that our wineries and our distilleries, especially the craft guys, think about the small folks that have started a distillery somewhere that are looking to get their product to market. Now they're going to have an opportunity as the visitors come in, everybody's on the bourbon trail, they're going to be able to start interacting with these customers and getting their story out there and keeping a relationship going forward, which is just really going to help them grow.
And on that note as well, California is known as Napa Valley, Kentucky, and this new wine. Do you think that this legislation could help Kentucky compete?
Well, and listen, we say this in Bardstown every day. We want to be the Napa Valley of the bourbon world. We are the bourbon capital of the world. We want folks to come have that same experience that you can get in Napa, but have it here in Nelson County, in Bardstown, and really all over Kentucky. We've got distilleries across the entire state. But we're on track. The growth is there, the demand is there, the product is there, and something that we have that those California wineries don't have is we have characters. The guys that are in this bourbon industry, if you really even go all the way back to history, it started with preachers. And we've just got some really interesting folks, and the story is so unique.
And talk about some of Bardstown's unique story with this bourbon and how popular it really is. People may not be aware that it is a happening place when it comes to bourbon and all the different distilleries that are going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And just this year, we've been to ribbon cuttings on 2 beautiful brand new distilleries that have a global connection. But so we've got Heaven Hill, we've got Willett, we've got Barton, Sazerac, we've got Preservation, we've got Jim Beam, we've got Four Roses right there. Kentucky Owl is just opening back up, and that's a Russian outfit building what's literally going to be a Disney World for bourbon. There's just so much happening. And folks that are in my town, we sometimes worry, are we getting ready to have a bubble? Is this too much growth? But the reality is, I get to travel all over the world, and there are still places in the United States you can't get bourbon, let alone foreign countries. So the demand for bourbon is so much bigger than we can really get our head around. and just the growth. In the last, I think it's been 2 years, we have 1.1 billion in new infrastructure going in just in the bourbon industry. And there's no stopping that.
And what's next for the bourbon industry in Kentucky? Is there any other potential legislation that you would like to see introduced in the 2019 session in regards to that industry?
Yeah, absolutely. We're working with the industry. I think they want to focus on three big things. Number one is social responsibility. The industry takes so seriously the commitment to making sure that our visitors have a safe and enjoyable, we want to get everybody home, so they're looking at rideshare programs, they're looking at making sure we have good DUI laws and interlock laws, things like that. Secondly is some tax reform. This one personally for me is something I really want to work on. You talked about Napa Valley. When you look at California and their wine industry, they have chosen not to tax it to death. In fact, it's one of the least taxed products in California. We've kind of gone the other way in Kentucky, and it doesn't make sense to me. I think it's because it's a sin tax, and it's always just been thought, well, here's an easy way to raise some revenue. But the fact is, the burden we have on our bourbon industry is really, really a high tax burden. And I think we ought to look at maybe changing that in some way. And then, we just passed House Bill 400, but it's not perfect. I want to see some changes made. We've got to work on issues like, for example, the law says a distiller can ship at the customer's request. Well, does that mean the distillery has to have an employee carry it all down to UPS? Or could a third party bring a UPS store into the parking lot and maybe do that? But so you'll see some tweaks and growing there as we all sort of learn and figure it out. But I think those are the three big areas that we're going to focus on.
Representative McCoy, thanks so much for talking with us about this new law that is in effect now and the work that you're doing to tackle this issue.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Hey, absolutely, you bet. Now, coming up, we sit down with Jill Hawkins of the Kentucky Bourbon Festival, an event that annually attracts over 60,000 people from around the world to Kentucky. Stick with us. You're watching In Focus Kentucky.